So now let's move on to what makes a bad cover, or in other words, what are some of the things that I see self-publishing authors mess up pretty often. The main thing is just don't focus on the details, focus on the mood. When I'm starting out dealing with a client, authors are always focused on scenes because they've written the book, they know what happens, so they want to choose a scene that will represent everything. And sometimes they'll make the mistake of focusing on like the pivotal scene or the main action scene, but you don't want to give that away on the book cover, even if that's the most interesting thing that happens in the book, because then you're just telling the ending. And so you want to be careful of that. But also, the cover is not really a place for a scene. A lot of people will try to put all of their characters on, or the certain background, or a lot of objects. They'll say, I want, a table with these 13 objects arranged like this on the table. You can't do that stuff easily with Photoshop or any design tool, because if you're building a whole scene like that, things are going to be wrong, especially like the lighting. Because if you can pull 20 different pictures from stock photography sites, and you can crop and edit them and put them all together so that they kind of look like they belong, but the lighting is always going to be different depending on the original photograph, and that's really hard to fix. That even if it looks like it's pretty good, it's just going to feel a little off, and people won't really know what's going on. So you want to limit how much you put in. It's not that hard to do things like you can change eye color or hair color. It's not easy to change clothing, because you'll have a model who's like, she has one position, and then you'd have to find clothes on another model with the exact same position to try to put that on. It's doable, but it's really not easy. So you really want to focus on, it's much easier to find like a model who's wearing the right clothes and just change your head so that the head fits your character. But I don't really like putting faces or heads in my book covers anyway, unless you really need like a perfect emotional expression on someone's face. But authors will also say like, they'll think in terms of symbolism, so they'll want maybe these two characters, and they'll want to express the emotions that the characters feel represents the entire kind of crux of the novel. So I want her looking at him with this feeling of blah blah blah. It's not easy to do, and you don't really want to focus on small details, because people aren't going to study the cover and figure out what you were trying to say. It's going to make an immediate impact, and they're going to click, and they're going to read the description, and then they're going to read the book if they like the description. They're not going to, muse over your cover and try to figure out what the book is totally about or how the characters feel about each other. They're just going to read the book. So don't worry so much about scenes or symbolism. Focus more on just representing the genre and making a strong impression. It's always better to make a strong first impression than to match the exact details. So also stuff like if you have a certain car or a certain motorcycle or a certain gun, and you want to make sure to match exactly the model that's in the book. It depends on your readers. If your readers are like all military and they all really know the different models of guns, so if you have, a pistol that is the same make but it's the wrong year or something, I mean, if all of your readers are going to notice that, then it's worth doing right. But most of your readers aren't, and they're not going to be reading your book and then go back to the cover and look at it and say, I think that's wrong, and then do some research and prove that you had the wrong details. Your cover just has to get them into the book. Once they're in the book and reading the story, they're not going to go back to the cover and look over it to make sure that it's right, because they don't really care that all the details are right. You want to make some things right. I mean, like if your heroine has red hair, you have to give her red hair if she's on the cover, because otherwise, they won't know who's on the cover, or it can't be totally off. Like one thing that bothered me about, I don't know if you know the book Pure. I think it's Pure. It's a great dystopian book, but she has one of her hands is melded onto this plastic doll. So one of the main features of the protagonist is that she only has one hand because the other hand is messed up. And so on the pure cover, or at least one of them for one of the countries I saw, there's a normal protagonist on the front without, she has two hands and they're normal hands. And so you just, like, you can't have a cover that's so completely wrong it doesn't match any of your characters on the inside of the book. On the other hand, it's always better to sell the book. So I mean, even like if maybe they decided that cover was going to sell more than a cover with her with only one hand and a doll's hand on the other side, or maybe they didn't want to give it away, you want to sell the book before people care about the details. And so don't worry about getting the cover that matches all the exact details specifically. Worry about having the cover that sells, the cover that makes the biggest impact, the cover that, really attracts people and makes them feel something and gets them to click and to read the rest of the description. The other things that people make a mistake is if they try to be different or interesting, they try to say, they want to stand out. They want to offer a mystery or a puzzle, something to figure out. That stuff doesn't work. It's not going to attract attention if it's different. If it's cool and it looks good and people are like, wow, that's amazing, I wonder what it means, maybe. But conceptual covers aren't going to work for most fiction because people aren't thinking about the reasons to buy when they're looking at your book cover. That comes later when they're reading your description. A lot of authors will think conceptually, and they'll want to represent their book with this symbolism or these scenes or stuff to figure out because they have this great concept. But nobody's going to think about your book cover. They're not going to try to understand it. They're not going to guess what genre it fits into or what it's about. It's got to just work. And so it's better to be pretty obvious than it is to be mysterious or aloof. But on the other hand, I mean, there's something to be said for the whole cliche thing. I'm working on one cover now where it's about graduation. And so we've got a lot of good book covers that are about, like, there's some great covers that I've made where it's a bunch of students wearing graduation caps looking happy. It's definitely about students. It's definitely about graduation. It's not conceptually about the title. The title is kind of looking forward to the future, what's after graduation, or what are you going to do next. So for the title, you would want a book cover that presents the problem, which is, which direction are you going to go in. So right now the author's leaning towards one choice, which is fine, which is a graduation guy, looking into the distance, and there's all these different roads and there's all these different signposts. So it's really obvious and clear, and it matches the title, which direction you're going to go to. Conceptually, it's fine. But at the same time, it's so obvious, it's a little bit cheesy, it's a little bit overdone. And I think it would have been better to go with a really strong, beautiful cover that makes an emotional impact rather than the one that conveys the problem of the book exactly, because that's what the title and the subtitle is for. Like, you've got to hook their attention first. You have to make them see the book cover as professional and well done and nice looking. Then they can read for those other details. They can read the subtitle. They can find out exactly what the book is about. They can read the description and find out if it's really for them or not. You don't need to convey those practical details on the book cover. That's not the book cover's job. For those practical details, like convincing them to buy the book, the reasons to buy the book, that's not the book cover's job. That's the description, that's the subtitle, those are the other things. The book cover's just, it's got to look good and catch attention and look professional enough and cool enough that people take you seriously. And then they'll give it a shot and read what the book is about and see if it fits what they're looking for. So also the last one is just trying to communicate the whole plot instead of the genre central conflict setting. For most fiction, the best thing you can do is just pick a setting or a landscape, a forest scene, a city, and then have a character in the front, either from the front of the back or close up. It's usually good to have some character somewhere, even if you don't show the whole person or the head. just to give it that human element. Not always, but in most cases, for a lot of genre fiction, that's what's going to work better. And you just need to pick the right fonts and the right colors, and maybe add some texture layers to give it that a little bit more, that effect, that wow feature. And we'll discuss more about like how to make a book cover good looking later when we're blending layers together. But mostly it's just keep it simple. Start with really amazing photographs, and don't add too many different details or try to blend too much stuff together, because of like really strong photographs, really good art is going to work better than trying to take 10 things and cramming them together, or changing the position, or you can do some things like adding jewelry, or if they have to be holding a gun or a knife, you can put that in, but everything you change just makes it a little bit harder to pull off and to make it look good.